what makes somebody successful is the belief systems that they operate from. And the most successful entrepreneurs work on themselves every single day, learning something new, getting out of their comfort zone, challenging their perspectives, challenging their beliefs, being introspective, having a mindset of how do I change this problem into a solution and see it as an opportunity, not an obstacle. It begins with the belief systems that we're operating from. And if you want to keep excelling, you have to go back to do exactly what we did in the beginning and start peeling back the layers.
You're listening to the Kristof Lewis Podcast, a podcast where I have conversations with inspirational people. My name is Chris, but my family calls me Kristof. My goal is to have as many conversations as possible with people who have forged their own path by pursuing their dreams, making them a reality, all the while emitting positivity and sharing this knowledge with others. I seek these people out and share this information with you, proving to the world that you can do what makes you happy and do what you want for a living while being a good human being. We'll talk about careers, but we'll also cover any story that inspires. Let's do this while helping each other. Thanks for listening. I'm happy you're here. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Kristof Lewis Podcast. This is conversation number 59, and I am your host, Kristof Lewis. My guest today is obsessed with elevating human potential. She's a speaker, an author, a serial entrepreneur. She invented the Butler bag, the first compartmentalized handbag for women. That's cool. And I had a wonderful conversation with her. We really picked apart the layers of emotional intelligence all the way through her childhood until now, and we actually formulated a case study between her and her Irish twin brother, and they, experienced everything that they experienced within their lives and went completely different paths, but the story has a great ending. You can find all the podcasts at www.kristoflewis.com, and you can find me on Instagram at kristoflewis. If you enjoy these episodes, head over to iTunes and rate 5 stars. I would really appreciate it. It means the absolute world to me. I'm telling you. I'm so thankful for this podcast, and it's therapeutic for me. I hope that this gives you value as well. I enjoy talking to everybody that I talk to on here, and I hope that this just really helps change your life, even if it's in the smallest way. And if it does, I'd love for you to tell a friend, and most importantly, I don't want you just to listen to this stuff. If you listen to the contemplations that come out on Thursdays, I say this every single week, but you can listen to all the best podcasts, read all of the most incredible books, have the best mentors that tell you all of the dirty secrets in life, but if you don't apply it, it doesn't mean anything. So yeah, I had a wonderful conversation with Jen. Jen Groover is my guest today. She's an incredible human being, but if you don't apply some of the things that we talked about, it doesn't mean anything. Apply the knowledge. Don't just intake it. It's 2 steps. Take in the knowledge, apply it. But without further ado, welcome to the Kristof Lewis Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. We've been trying to do this for a minute. We were just joking about, and things always come up. I think like every couple podcasts I record, I say something like this. Technology, as good as it is, there's always something that comes up. But I think 2 people that are committed to like help others and help each other, we're gonna find a way.
It can happen. Yeah. And today we did.
Yeah. So I met you through our mutual friend Inez, who was on my conversations about maybe 30 conversations ago now. I can't believe we're already here, but you were on her podcast and she introduced us, and I was just so excited to she's like, who do you want to talk to? And I said, I want to talk to Jen. I looked through her guests and I said, I wanted to talk to you through just listening to the words you were saying, and you inspired me through listening to your guys' conversation and everything you've done. So I kind of wanted to talk about how you evolved to that. I mean, I know you went to college and you started things, had an entrepreneurial mindset very early. I think I heard you quote, or one of your quotes is, I was an entrepreneur before it was cool. And I was just laughing when I heard that. And I was like, this woman's been doing this for a minute. She's setting out what's cool. So no, I just want to kind of get in your mindset for that. I'll digress for 1 second, because I heard you tell this story about how you got into handbags with the Butler bag, and I thought that was so cool. You saw a problem and you wanted to identify it, and I'll go even further by saying you quoted your mom by saying if there's a problem, you can't complain about it, but identify a solution. And I literally say that all the time to people in my life as well as myself. So when I heard you say that, that like solidified why I wanted to talk to you. But enough with the long-winded intro. I'd like to know, like, what really, I mean, was it just the butler bag? But I feel like the mindset behind that, like that mindset that your mother helped implement with you by raising you, did it start at an earlier age, or was it just like, hey, I need to develop something, let's go into it?
So there's layers of it, right? So my dad was a drill sergeant in the Marines. So
very cool.
A high level of discipline and work ethic in my home. My mom, she was raised in Brooklyn, New York, and her uncle was Vince Lombardi. So she was exposed to all this big level thinking, like she was being motivationally spoke to her whole life. And my grandfather was a pharmacist. So back then that was like a celebrity in your town. And so my mom had this very big mindset. She met my father in Philadelphia. She was one of the first models for 17 magazine. And very cool. She was doing a photo shoot in Philly and her hair all fell out because she had kinky curly hair and they tried to straighten it. And this was back in the 60s and all her hair fell out.
That sounds terrible.
That's how they met. But, they both gave a lot of footprints and impressions to make me. There's layers to it. My dad was also, unfortunately, an alcoholic. So there was and this goes into so much of what I teach about emotional intelligence, healing, and being self-aware, because he grew up in an abusive childhood. He started drinking very young, and it was very self-medicating, and he didn't know he didn't realize the pattern that he was creating. And so when my mom and my dad got together, they were two people that were very headstrong and were not good for each other. They fueled each other in a way that was very explosive. And so my childhood, while I had all these different good impressions, I also grew up in the throes of chaos and very unsteady, high stress environment, which led to me being creative and innovative and self-sufficient. My creativity and my imagination is where I'd escape in order to ease my reality during those time periods. And so, and my mom, she wound up having a TV show that was first when cable started with this Cablevision. And because of her background, she ran campaigns for politicians, but she'd invite athletes on the show all the time out of her own selfish curiosities.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I do the same thing.
So I would sit in a television studio after school for years in my childhood, listening to these interviews. Now, I hated this experience as a child, but I believe it planted so many seeds, because her questions were always it's Tug McGraw, it was Ron Jaworski, it was Steve Carlton, it was all these greats, legends, Pete Rose. And cool. You can obviously all tell I'm from Philly now.
Yeah. Right.
Philly. I would hear these conversations that I believe very much impression my desire to not just be average. So there's not one answer. There's layers to this.
Hardly is. Yeah. And that's why I'm always curious about asking, because everybody answers it differently. And that's one of the many pillars, I was kind of describing the podcast stands on, is I kind of picking apart the background and how people have not, because I don't want people to just look at people that have reached, quote unquote, any kind of, success or what they're doing in life, you being an entrepreneur and everything else that you're doing. Because some people look at that and they're like, well, she just arrived there, and, they don't really know how that was. So I you and Inez talk about emotional intelligence a lot. So I kind of especially picking into that. And I love that you brought it back all the way until you were a child. And it's really interesting for me, especially now that I'm a father, to see how that is formulated in the young brain and then how that carries over when you grow up. So I think having a layered question or having a layered answer, as you described it, is very interesting to me to see how it all kind of added on top of each other and then grew into the mindset that you currently have.
What's fascinating is, and my degree is in psychology and education, so I pick apart everything. There is no one answer doesn't only have one answer to it. There's layers in every answer. And I read into, it may be too much, but I read into why things are what they are and why people do what they do. And
it's
my
good to
brother
question
was
those
only
things,
11.
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. What's that?
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just saying it's good to question all of those things past, like you're talking about in layers. It's good to question past like a surface layer. I'm the same exact way.
Yeah. I wish we all did more. We'd find so much more out about each other if we had asked these deeper questions. In an interview setting, we totally can, but a lot of people don't do it socially. But my brother was only 11 months older than me, and this is a really cool psychological case study. 11 months to the day, we were Irish twins. So we were born in the same environment. Now, his outcome of life is extremely different than my outcome of life. He had a lot of stories that literally I couldn't even wrap my head around happen, where he became very angry. He became very obese, frankly, because he would be emotionally eating.
Sure.
He became very entitled. He thought the world owed him something. It was so opposite. And what I know to be true, and what I can say of this, what does it take somebody to be a successful entrepreneur, in my opinion, is not having a victim mindset.
Absolutely.
He embodied a victim mindset where I just went through life like, all right, cool, bad circumstance. What did I learn from it? Another one. What did I learn from it? And I never projected anyone else to have responsibility for that other than myself. And
I love that.
And took control of my life. And that to me is what makes a great entrepreneur, is that they have the mindset of taking control of their life and no one owes them anything. And the people that walk around thinking that they're owed something, that they're mad at people for and blaming people for, will never, ever maximize their potential, because they've limited their potential in that and of itself.
Interesting. So first of all, I'll say that that's a really interesting case study to see you guys separate like that from each other. But furthermore, I'm wondering, someone in your brother's position here, I think the best way to ask this question is, well, number one, is he still the way he is, of what you described? And if he is, how would one, maybe if they were listening to this and they just identified themselves as that, victim mentality, that's hard to break out of. How would you break out of that?
Yeah. I'm so glad you're asking that question, because that's like real juicy question.
Yeah, I want to get into that juicy stuff. I mean, that's tough stuff, because we want to, I was telling you real quick before we started recording, and I was like, I want to use you as an example. I want to use guests as an example, because you have this mindset. And then now I know about your brother, and to see that, like you described it as a case study, it's really interesting to me, because my first question was, well, how did you grow up? What instilled the mindset you have now? So to have two people as the Irish twins grow up, same family, same whatever, you name it, and then to see the paths separate is interesting, because if I was interviewing him, he would have answered it completely different, but had the same experiences. So it's how we react to things. It's very interesting.
It's a perception to the experiences, right? The story that he gave those experiences are so different than the story that I'm giving those experiences. What's interesting is my dad cheated on my mom when we were younger, and he had this perpetual thing of cheating on women all the time. He would hurt people before they could hurt him.
Sure.
It was just literally like this case study of opposites.
Wow.
And what's fascinating is he started dating this woman a few years ago who apparently he did his same cycle with. Like, he gets close to someone, he falls madly in love with them quickly, and then becomes codependent on wanting that person to fill the holes within him. And then once he gets too vulnerable, he pushes them away by self-sabotaging. So he dated this woman and started the same patterns. And I never met her. And she reached out to me on Facebook.
Wow.
And she said, your brother talks about you all the time. I follow you on social media, and you two could not be more opposite. I just can't wrap my head around how this is. So I said to her, has he told you about our childhood at all? And she's like, only little parts of it. But he expresses himself very explosively, he's very angry all the time at everything. And so I finally gave her my perception to extract things from.
Sure.
And how psychologically he probably perpetuated the stories in his mind to become what they were. And how she could really help heal him if she wanted to. And that's a huge undertaking. I
Yeah.
do it for a living,
Yeah.
but to do it in the container of a relationship is a huge
I
undertaking.
think it's
Uh,
different. Yeah.
and we all have the power to heal each other, or hurt each other more. So she could have explosively went back at him and let him sabotage the relationship, which validates his ego of everybody leaves me.
Yeah.
But she didn't, because she was empowered with this new insight and information and knowledge,
Sure.
and being a very strong woman, like really strong woman, she stayed in it and
Good for her.
literally healed him. And he
Wow.
lost naturally, because when you start to heal and you don't emotionally need to fuel your voids
Yeah. Yeah.
with food, he lost over 100 pounds recently. Naturally, like not killing himself working out. He just
Yeah. Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
overeat as much anymore because he didn't feel that need to.
Sure.
And he's now, he finally started going to a therapist, which he totally was against before.
Yeah.
And he has radically changed in the last 2 years.
So
It's been
cool.
miraculous, really.
That's
So
that's incredible.
everyone can change, is my point of that too. It's never too late, but you've got to want to, and you've got to use the tools that are around you,
Mm-hmm.
or find the tools if they're not around you. But I do believe, and I love seeing his transformation, because one of the biggest battles or debates I have with people is saying everyone can change. I believe everyone can
Yeah,
change,
I'm right with you.
but they have to have the desire first and foremost, and the ability to utilize the resources around them or access resources. So a lot of people don't change because they just don't have the suggestion things could be different, and then they don't have the tools of how it could be different.
I'm first of all, I'm blown away. I think that's so cool. I think I'm like thinking of this woman that entered his life, and I'm like, what a strong individual. Like
Yeah,
to
yeah,
undertake that after years and years and years. Like, yes, I do believe everybody can change, but I think I'm just really impressed by somebody taking that under their wing, and somebody that's lived their whole entire life like that. I mean, that's deep. That's pretty heavy to me. And I'm glad you brought that up. It's so interesting. And we describe that as a case study, but the case study continues. And somebody can come
yeah,
in there, like, so again, like somebody listening, just because you are the way you are, maybe somebody in your life is the equivalent of, your brother here in this scenario. It doesn't mean there's no hope for you. It doesn't mean there's no hope for them. It could be your spouse, could be, whoever in your life, your parents, your children, I don't know. But the point is there's hope. And it's incredible to see that there are strong people out there that are willing to undertake that. And I think that just speaks so much towards having people in your life that are going to help you maybe fight a battle, because you can do it by yourself, but it's a lot easier when you have somebody standing by your side to be able to do that. I think that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that.
yeah. You're welcome. It's opposite then of what a lot of people now live with, this disposable reality that we have.
Sure.
Everyone's somewhat disposable. And if it's tough, then we leave it. If it's uncomfortable, then we escape it. And so it takes a very strong, like you said, personality for someone to stay in there with somebody, because it wasn't easy. And there's a lot of fights that went
I can't
along with
imagine.
that. And
Yeah.
but what you ultimately need, whether it's a person or a business, what you ultimately need is the agreement of two people or multiple parties to desire a certain outcome.
Sure.
And if you desire a certain outcome, it might take the work to get there, but at least everyone's working to the same outcome. Where you have a problem, whether it's business partners, life partners, friends, if everyone desires a different outcome, it's never going to work out to be on the same page.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So this is more recent. You said within the last 2 years. That's incredible. And then I kind of want to jump back into you as well. So I know this entrepreneurial journey, I guess, I don't know if officially is the right word to use, but officially started when you got out of college. And I just think that's really incredible how you, going back to, the initial stuff we were talking about, how you identified a problem and you're like, there's got to be a solution to this. Like, how has nobody done this before? And I think it's one thing to have that mindset, but I think it's a completely different mindset to act on that. Because everybody's like, oh, I've had that idea for that invention, but it was like, you didn't do it. You know, you didn't put in the work, but you put in the work. And I can't imagine it must have been really difficult.
So going back to another impressioning too, my dad, he was an attorney and he had his own law firm. And his whole thing, his autonomy was everything to him. Mm-hmm. So he'd always say to people, I never want to work Fridays and I want to come and go as I please. And I believe that really was like another big thing that impressioned me.
Yeah.
Like, Friday's off, come and go as you please. That's awesome. So when I graduated college, my passion was fitness. So I had my first business was actually in the fitness industry.
Okay.
And my degree, as I mentioned, was in psychology and education. So my dad thought I was supposed to be a school teacher, which I never intended to do. That was just my degree. And I believed and knew to be true that those two degrees can be used in everything. You can be a teacher in anything, in sales and management, leadership, coaching, whatever.
Yeah.
And psychology is human behavior. So that's also everything. So when I was in college, I actually started by my own selfish needs and desires, a group fitness program.
Sure.
So that was my first actual entrepreneurial foray that I didn't realize I was doing until now I look back. But
that's so funny how that happens though. Like it's cool to hear you say that. I love these things that like come up as we're jockeying this conversation, because I always say, like, people are like, well, how do I find it? And I've asked myself, like, how do you find it? And it's like, sometimes you might actually already be doing it and you might not know it only when you look back on it. So that's pretty cool.
So true. And again, entrepreneurship wasn't a thing back then. I mean, there were small business owners, but and this is in the early 90s. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm starting my own business. People literally after college, when I started my own business, now furthering in the fitness industry, people literally think like, are you unemployable? Can no one hire you?
Yeah, there's a completely different mindset. You're right. And that kind of like brings me back to, or not brings me back, but it kind of propels me forward to talk about education between, you know, self-education, formal education, college, not having college. And you obviously, like you said, you had a degree in psychology, but it's funny how the times change in a sense of where people, it's hilarious. Like, is she unemployable or is she not? But now it's like, do you even need college? Like and this is strictly my opinion. Like for me, for your information, like I dropped out of college. I was in the military for almost a decade and I was able to get a job without a college degree. And I feel like I'm seeing that more, like it's feasible. And I've even read multiple articles that even the huge tech companies are hiring without college degrees. So it is pretty interesting to me, but I want to talk about you in the sense of how I think it's really important to pick out of that you did it and there were still people around like, oh my God, is she crazy or is she unemployable? But you still did what you wanted to do, even though the status quo is completely different. That's really important.
Yeah. I wanted to be alive, right? So when I started that group fitness program in college and I had my first class and I was scared to death, like what if no one shows up? And I was scared to death, like my choreography wasn't going to be, all this stuff that I was scared to death about. And when it all happened and it worked out, I felt alive, like really the first time in my life, other than when you're like a kid running free playing, I felt so alive. And I wanted that sensation to go on for the rest of my life. And it just seemed so bizarre to me that people adopted this belief that like life was supposed to be miserable and you're supposed to hate your job and look forward to Fridays and hate Mondays. And just FYI, I don't believe that traditional education is the key to success. As a matter of fact, I believe for many people, it squashes people's potential because so many limited beliefs are projected upon people from certain teachers. I believe education and knowledge is very important.
Absolutely.
But I don't believe, my kids talk about college and I say to them, there is no pressure on you. If you go, I look at it more as a social experiment. And ideally what I would love is for you to start a business now or take the money I would spend on college and I'll invest it in a business. And I'm not going to say that they can't go to college, but I don't believe that they have to go to college to be successful. And as a matter of fact, I have a lot of friends who are really successful entrepreneurs who their kids are homeschooled. They get through their like school day in like 2 hours. And then they have their kids off at personal development conferences and real estate conferences and
That's
learning
so
about
cool.
real stuff,
That's awesome.
like real life skills.
Yes, the
And
things that they don't teach in school.
that they don't teach in school. Like my daughters are freshmen in high school, and the algebra teacher last semester was like, I'm really worried about Morgan. And I said, no offense. And I know I really don't want this to sound wrong, but she's never going to use algebra probably again in her life. So I'm really not worried about it. If this was public speaking, or if this was a course on using technology to create platforms, I'd be a lot more worried. But she's never using this again, so I really don't care. Like, I'm actually annoyed that we're having this conversation right now, that
Yes.
she's reading To Kill a Mockingbird right now and learning algebra and the same things that I was doing that are irrelevant in her level of success. And going back to the conversation of school, ultimately the question I say all the time is, what is the purpose of school? What is the purpose? So that we can give children an upper hand in becoming successful. But wouldn't it make more sense for them to be learning things that are relevant to being successful today in this society, in this world? And they're not being taught that for the most part. And again, college to me even was I got a lot from psychology, a lot from it. Otherwise, it was a social experiment. Everything that I've achieved outside of college, other than the psychology component, was me figuring it out, taking a lot of courses, reading tons of books.
That stuff. You're right. I mean, nobody teaches that stuff. And it's interesting here because I always wonder, I was like, it's been a while since I've been in school. It's been, oh gosh, probably at least 12 or 13 years. And it's going to be a while before my daughter's in school. She's 2 months old, so I got a long time. But I'm curious because now they're in high school, so I'm hearing it from the horse's mouth how it still is, and it's been like that for decades, and I think it's an archaic way of learning. I think to kind of dive into what you're saying about that's the way it's been for so long, and also having having self-education in that manner, because you're not going to learn that stuff in school. I would at least like to see, I think, I'm a new parent, but I at least want to give my children, we want to have children, so I want to give my children options. At least what it is. Like, you're going to go to school, you're going to go to, public or private school. And then I feel the same way about college. If you want to go, I'm not going to stop you. But at the same time, I'm also not going to force you to go to school. So I'm giving all these examples because just as we teach ourselves right now, I would like to see all the things that you said you taught yourself. I want those options. You can have like the formal education, like you can still do some things how you used to do them, but you need to be able to present other options so the individual can make the best decision themselves. So they don't, I just feel like I was forced into, you have to go to college if you want to be successful. And if you don't go to college, you're not going to be successful. And then like, I dropped out because I was bored, and it's so sad because I'm actually disgusted in saying that I was bored, because now if I would never say I was bored now. I don't have enough time in the day to do the things. And I love learning, and I love reading, I love having these conversations, but it didn't happen until like 5 years after college. So I'm like, where I felt like I didn't want to not accept blame, because obviously those books and those things were out there. I could have done that, but I wish I would at least been like, somebody been like, hey, like these are options too, or hey, if you don't go to college, you're not going to be a failure in life. And I just always want to present, whether it's your children, your friends, your family, whomever in your life, I want to present a bunch of options. And it's awesome to hear that you're doing that for your family right now.
Yeah, I mean, also you look at the cost, right, and the debt.
Yeah, and you went as far to, like, I want to cut you off because I want to say, like, because you went as far as saying, like, if you don't want to go to college, like, let's invest in a business. Like, why don't we need to expand that knowledge to everybody else? Like, it's so tunnel visioned, right? It's like, this is the only way. You have to put these tens of thousands of dollars into college. Like, there's other ways to do it. So I'm so happy you said that.
One of my very dear friends is one of the entrepreneurs I referred to, whose children are homeschooled, and they live in Florida, and they go to all these personal development and real estate and investment portfolio things, and so he's exposed them to a lot of real life things, and they travel a lot,
which is
so
great.
he exposes them to culture, and
absolutely.
These kids, one is 14 and one is 17. and they each have portfolios of their own money and their own investments, probably close to about $250,000 to $300,000 a year right now.
Wow.
On their own, from everything that their father has taught them. Now, the one is going to be just graduating, and so she's not going to college. She's going to film production school, and she has a whole business model in her mind around film production school, because that is a trade and a craft that, even if she's making as an editor videos for companies, that would keep her busy all day long, every day, right? Yes. So that's a real life skill. She might not become a Steven Spielberg, but she can use that skill for so many other things. And we have to really question, if my kids are going to a $60,000 a year school for 4 years, 60 times 4 times 2 at the same time, I could invest that in their future in building a company and guide them. That to me makes so much more sense. So we just really need to question what the relevancy, and I know there's a lot of people that are academics that get up in arms about this conversation, but then it's a cry to change it then. Yeah. So make it relevant. And I spoke at Penn recently, and I was in the Innovation Center, and I joked the feedback was amazing, and I had all these students that were engineers and stuff, and I just didn't think that it was going to mesh because they're so academic there.
Sure.
And I said to the dean, I should teach here. And he goes, you can't. And I said, what do you mean I can't? And he goes, well, you didn't graduate from an Ivy League school. And I said, interesting. So I invented products. I have proven my success in inventing things and starting businesses and growing them.
So twisted.
Michael Dell has. And the list could go on.
Yeah.
None of us could teach here, yet you have not created a product or a service or business, and you're allowed to teach. Does that make sense to you? Does it make sense to me? Because now you're teaching theory and not real life experience.
Which theory only matters until you need execution. We were talking about that. Like I was telling you, that's what I enjoyed seeing in yourself, was that you didn't just have a problem and identify the problem, which is important. You acted on it. And it's sad to me that a piece of paper weighs more than that action. But I think the bigger question is, how do we help change that?
Yeah.
How do we help do that? And I've had this question come up a lot. I've talked to a high school teacher. I've talked to a college professor, and I did ask these questions as well. And I was actually really happy to hear that the college, actually they both said it, but even more so the college professor said that there needs to be a change as well, because he's teaching his son some of the things that we're talking about right now. And he's doing his best. That's why actually I loved speaking with him. And he's doing his best to implement that as well as much as he can. But it just seems like people's hands are tied, and ultimately we're not doing a lot to make that change. And I don't know how to answer that question myself. I don't know how. I mean, that's a mass issue, and I know
it's a mass issue because there's so many politics involved in it. And that's part of it. I mean, unionization of it is the beginning of the downfall, right? Everyone's safe. Everyone can get complacent. Why would you create a new lesson plan if you're just going to get paid anyway?
So it's just, to me, it's demoralizing. I mean, especially, it was always demoralizing, but now having a child, I'm just like, and that's what we got to do. I think the way to answer that question here in closing is that we may not be able to change it on a mass scale. It doesn't mean we shouldn't try, but I do believe that us as parents, that we can educate our children in that manner to, hey, all right, just like your friend, like that's an incredible example. They're teaching them that. And they're building their portfolios massively already at such a young age. So it's definitely feasible. So if we can't change it on such a large scale because politics are so much in the way, they're a barrier, then we have to take it upon ourselves, and we can at least apply it to our lives and help our children out, and then hopefully have more conversations like this that are captured and recorded and spread those out and help us spread that awareness as well.
Well, it just challenging people to question things like, does this really make sense? And what made sense 20 years ago doesn't make sense today. And by the way, in all those articles that you're talking about, I've read a lot of them too. And And trade schools are having a huge uptake right now because there's going back to this trade mentality of learning a craft and mastering a craft is really valuable. And that during my time of going to college was kind of poo-pooed. Where, by the way, my friends that went to these different trade schools, especially this one famous one called Williamson Trade, are all ridiculously successful after that. But, it's having a conversation and challenging. Like, I'd rather my kid learning, instead of sitting in algebra, learning how to use Canva, learning how to use PowerPoint and Keynote and all these digital presentation skills instead of, there's still algorithms in that. There's still math to figure out. But to be learning something that's no longer relevant in our society is just laziness, is really what it comes down to. But, we all have access to the biggest university in the world, and it's called Google. And
you're absolutely right.
We all have a fair advantage right now. Unless you don't have a phone, we are all on the same playing field.
No, you're absolutely right. That's why I hate hearing people say, oh, social media is such a distraction, the internet's such a distraction. It's a distraction if you make it a distraction. It's just a tool. Use the tool for the job. If you, I do all my business on my phone, right? So I think that's a great answer. And we could probably carry on this conversation for another hour easily. But I've thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with you. I think we posed some very challenging questions there and hopefully gave some good answers. I know some of those are there isn't a straightforward answer, but the case study, tearing everything apart since we started talking is very interesting to me, and I'm going to do a lot of thinking about it as well after the fact, like I always do. So thank you so much for your time, Jen. What's the best way that people can contact you if they'd like to contact you?
Well, before I say that, if you don't mind, I want to say one thing.
Absolutely. Have at it.
Going back to your original question, in my opinion of being an entrepreneur for over 20 years and teaching entrepreneurs all over the world and teaching human potential, what makes somebody successful is the belief systems that they operate from. And the most successful entrepreneurs work on themselves every single day, learning something new, getting out of their comfort zone, challenging their perspectives, challenging their beliefs, being introspective, having a mindset of how do I change this problem into a solution and see it as an opportunity, not an obstacle. And so it begins with the belief systems that we're operating from. And if you want to keep excelling, you have to go back to do exactly what we did in the beginning and start peeling back the layers.
You're absolutely right. And that's an amazing, amazing note to end on. I'm glad you added that tidbit. Thank you so much.
The social media, to answer your question, is I'm all over social media. My name, and really active on Facebook, more so my personal page than my public page. Instagram, LinkedIn as well. So, and I post a lot about things like this there.
Yeah, that's good to be able to do that. And we'll definitely include all of that in the show notes so everybody can kind of find you wherever they want to find you, whatever, suits their fancy. So Jen, again, thank you so much. I'm so glad we did this, and I had a wonderful time speaking with you and picking back those layers and peeling them back.
Likewise. I look forward to doing it again.
Absolutely, Jen. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.
See ya.